Donald Trump says he's going to change the name of Lake Ontario to Lake of America. This guy's running a country. Does he have not, like, other better things to do than, I'm going to change the name of this? I don't get it, man. You have a big country to take care of and a lot of problems. And it doesn't matter if you do that because it's not going to change anything. The Americans will call it the Lake of America, but do you think us Canadians are going to call it what you want? God damn, man. Grumpy old man he is. Follow me for more Canada Strong, y'all.
Well, somebody tell the map makers to get their pens back out because President Trump is out here renaming bodies of water again. What am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you. Mere moments ago, President Trump signed an executive order renaming Lake Ontario to Lake America because as President of the United States of America, he has every right to do that. Part of his executive order reads, "It is the policy of my administration to recognize the extraordinary contributions of the American people and the rich heritage of our history by naming great natural landmarks for our shared achievements. The United States is the greatest protector of the Great Lakes, including the body of water currently known as Lake Ontario. Without the security and investment provided by the United States, this freshwater system would not be open for shipping, recreation, and responsible use to the same extent it is today. The United States Coast Guard supplies 9 of the 11 ice-breaking vessels on the Great Lakes, securing commercial shipping lanes free of charge. The United States has invested nearly $4 billion in protecting the Great Lakes freshwater ecosystem in the last decade, while Canada has invested far less in similar initiatives in the same time period." Now, this, of course, comes on the heels of Prime Minister Mark Carney announcing that he is at war with the United States of America. Of course, he means an economic war, not a hot one, because that would end in about 2 seconds. But nonetheless, President Trump has taken to what he does best, embarrassing world leaders by renaming things that he has every right to rename. Now, does this make a difference in anything? No, not really. Is it cool as hell that President Trump is just going to rename bodies of water because he feels like it? Absolutely.
So Donald Trump is having a massive temper tantrum. He's going to start renaming things. He's going to start calling his wife Natalie. And he's going to start calling Lake Ontario Lake America. Word joke. Honestly, though, I think we should rename things. I think that'd be good. How about we call New York State Southern Ontario? How about that? Southern Ontario is now New York State. That's great. We like that. But let's go along with the naming of things. Lake Ontario, let's rename it. And I think Donald would love this. Lake Obama. Lake Biden. Let's call Lake Superior. I'm not sure if all Canadians would be in favor of this, but let's do it anyway, just to piss the dick off. Lake Superior will now be called Lake Trudeau. Yeah, let's rename everything. Let's call Florida New Canada. I think that's a winner because there's so many Canadians down there. You know what I mean? New Canada. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. What should we rename things in the United States of America? I can't wait to hear the comments.
Trump has officially renamed Lake Ontario to Lake America, but there are some pieces of the executive order that you probably didn't read that I'm going to show you. You can find this along with all of the other things at whitehouse.gov. It is Executive Order 14420. And as it starts here, it's part of restoring names that honor American greatness. Here's just some of what it says in the executive order. The United States is the greatest protector of the Great Lakes, including the body of water currently known as Lake Ontario. Without the security and investment provided by the United States, this freshwater system would not be open for shipping, recreation, and responsible use to the same extent as it is today. The United States Coast Guard supplies 9 of the 11 ice-breaking vessels on the Great Lakes. Remember how Carney said the other day they only have 1 icebreaker? Anyway, is securing commercial shipping lanes free of charge. The United States has invested nearly $4 billion in protecting the Great Lakes freshwater ecosystem in the last decade, while Canada has invested far less. In Section 2, he goes on to say, with the deepest parts of the lake's waters lying within the United States territory, the United States claims most of the lake's volume. And the lake will continue to play a pivotal role in shaping America's future in the global economy. And in recognition of this flourishing economic resource and its critical importance to our nation's economy and people, I am directing that the lake officially be renamed as Lake America. And then he followed it up with a little demonstration video.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada and in the United States. But we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a Gulf, because we have the Gulf of America, now we have Lake America, without the of. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy Lake America.
Of course, it's still Lake Ontario to the rest of the world, so Donald can draw on all the maps that he wants to and direct his Department of Interior to do whatever they're doing, but it doesn't change anything. However, using an executive order to slam Canada in it is a real specific choice, and one that should not be ignored when we are currently in a war between the two countries.
I got some good news for all you red farmers out there that are about to lose your ranches and dairy farms. Watch.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada and in the United States. But we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a Gulf, because we have the Gulf of America, now we have Lake America, without the of. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy Lake America.
Yes, we got Lake Ontario to now become Lake America. Just with a stroke of a pen, guys, just like he did with the Gulf of Mexico, is now the Gulf of America. This is fantastic news for all of you farmers and ranchers that voted for him that are losing your businesses. I, the stink of Stink Nation, am so happy you're getting exactly
what you voted for. You wanted him to troll the libs, to troll Canada. You wanted him to do this crazy stuff. I am so happy you're getting exactly what you voted for. With that being said, it's time now to promote our blue farmers and blue ranchers. Watch.
Chris Gibbs here in Ohio, where we've got the trifecta of stupid. But first, I want you to meet my cows. They're pasture fed, making the best use possible of non-cropland with no chemical applications, and they're working hard every day to do everything right to feed you, a nation, and beyond. And what do we get for it here in Ohio? We get Vivek Ramaswamy, who believes my livelihood is immoral because he believes these animals were put on the earth to be worshipped and not used to sustain us. And by the way, they make terrible house pets. And beyond that, we've got John Huston, who never saw a retaliatory reciprocal tariff he didn't like, and now their daddy Trump is going to import beef from other countries like Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, and Uruguay to make sure I'm not making too much money. Somebody help me make sense of it.
Meet Christopher Gibbs, a blue farmer and rancher in Ohio. It's time, guys, that we truly throw the American people's support behind the people that didn't vote for him. Because they voted in our best interest, like they voted in their best interest. And when you do follow him, Tell him that the steak sent you. Now, with that in mind, to support our blue dot farmers, I found this directory that you can use. It's called the Blue Farm Directory, and I have made it very easy for you to find. It is in my link tree. This is a quick summary of what it is. Please pause to read. This is where the shunning begins. You know, the shunning that I've been talking about when I say never forgive and never forget what they have done to this country. This website is where it starts. We can support the local farmers, these blue dot farmers that didn't vote for this, while shunning and putting out of business the ones that did. And I'm gonna say it again. It's right in my link tree. It's very easy to find. If you need beef, dairy, doesn't matter. Go to this website, find your local blue dot farmer in your area, and order some food. Guys, tell me what you think about this in the comments. And if you haven't followed me yet, please do. Have a day!
So Donald Trump wants to call Lake Ontario Lake America. This is because he got into a little spat with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. He says that they will not be doing trade with Ontario going forward, so they're going to rename it Lake America. What's funny about this is Lake Ontario is not actually named after the province of Ontario. The province of Ontario is actually named after Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario was named after the Wendat word, the same name of Ontario, going back centuries before the province of Ontario was even called that. So just a little Canadian-American history lesson. I mean, it's a pretty shared history. It's the same region. So yeah, Lake Ontario is not actually named after Ontario. It's the other way around. And if he wants to call it Lake America, I don't know, it may get confusing with the Gulf of America.
Well, this morning the president said that his administration is giving serious consideration to renaming Lake Ontario Lake America. Oh, the big, strong man is going to call something by another name. Oh, he is so tough. But then he explained why. In that we don't expect to be doing much business with Ontario any longer. That second half is doing a lot more work than the name. Friday night, Canada walked away from trade talks. Saturday morning, 50% US tariffs hit about $20 billion in Canadian goods. Monday, Trump threatened 50% tariffs on Canadian cars, trucks, and auto parts starting January 1st and told Canadian leaders to fall in line or face consequences far worse. Today, Canada answered with tariffs of roughly 27.6 billion Canadian dollars of American goods at rates of 15, 25, and 50%, starting September 8th. It also announced another 7.5 billion Canadian dollars in support for affected workers and businesses. Then, in the middle of all that, we get Lake America. Yeah. Trump's done the renaming thing, I guess his whole life, really. The federal government now calls the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Hasn't that made your life better? And Denali Mount McKinley, Lake Ontario, is a little different because the international boundary runs straight through it. New York on one side, Ontario on the other. Washington can decide what federal agencies call the lake. It can't decide what Canada calls it. What caught my attention is that Trump himself connected the proposed name change to doing less business with Ontario because that lines up almost perfectly with what just happened in these trade talks. Near the end, American negotiators reportedly pushed Canada on two big issues. They wanted Canada to align some of its tariffs on third countries with American tariffs. They also wanted restrictions on Canada negotiating trade agreements with other countries without US approval, potentially giving Washington influence over the terms. That reaches well beyond the tariff the United States charges Canada. Now we're talking about what Canada charges other countries and how Canada conducts its own trade policy. Mark Carney said the American approach was treating Canada like a subsidiary of the United States. There was another fight over Canadian cultural policy, Carney says. American negotiators pushed Canada over French language content, labeling rules and cultural protections. The U.S. Trade Representative disputes that and says the objection was really about rules imposed on American streaming companies. Okay. Even in Washington's version, the negotiations had moved into Canadian domestic policy and the rules Canada applies to American companies operating there. Really got to watch out for all of the companies. They are defenseless and helpless. Now that is important enough to talk about because the US has always been vastly more powerful in that way than Canada. Nobody needed to pretend otherwise. The post-war alliance system worked because smaller allies were still sovereign countries with their own governments and interests and choices. That was the whole point. Trump's approach increasingly uses the imbalance itself as the argument. America has more leverage, so allies should accommodate American demands. And we've seen that sometimes it does work, I'll put in quotes, but it also gives your allies a very good reason to start figuring out how to need you less. Trump isn't necessarily the great relationship builder here, right? Not even a good deal maker. Iran's proving that. Canada is already pursuing deeper trade relationships with India and Southeast Asia, investing in new icebreakers and putting billions behind efforts to make its economy less vulnerable to American pressure. So yes, Lake America is a ridiculous little headline from a ridiculous little person. It's also sort of unusually revealing. Lake Ontario will still be sitting between Toronto and Rochester tomorrow morning, whatever DC decides to call it. The relationship is the thing that's actually changing. But again, it is only to improve the average citizen's lives and America's standing in the world. Can't you tell? America can use its enormous power to pressure allies into complying. It's working out great, right? And that still leaves us with the question that says, what happens after you do that enough times that those allies start building a future where they don't have to rely on you at all, or at least not nearly as much? Yeah. Good job, everyone. We appreciate your efforts in electing this person. I'll see you soon.
So Donald Trump just signed an executive order to rename Lake Ontario to Lake America, but there's one big problem, and that is that he does not have the authority or power to do that. In his latest step with the war on Canada, Trump said this.
We're going to be changing the name of Lake Ontario, effective immediately, to Lake America. That's going to take place right now as I sign the order.
Again, he doesn't have the actual authority to do this. All that he can do is rename the side of Lake Ontario that's in the United States of America to the Lake of America. So congrats. We now have 6 Great Lakes. And all that this really does in practice is continue to distance ourselves from one of our closest allies and neighbors, Canada. So as he signed this executive order, he also floated the idea of renaming the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, which again, does not have the power to do. So share this video to help spread the word. There's 6 Great Lakes now, and we continue to make enemies of our allies. Follow me to stay in the loop.